Welcome to another episode of the Is That So Show. Thank y'all for joining me. Y'all know I'm the host, nocturnal therapist, Harry Turner, aka so many other things. But of course, I'm not providing therapeutic advice on here. I am just the nocturnal therapist in title and in energy. Therapy. When I think about therapy, I think about the understanding of oneself, the expansion of awareness and insight a person gains when coming into therapy from just exploring things that were always right in front of them, but they just need a little bit more guidance as it pertains to where to look at. When people meditate or when they pray, they close their eyes. I don't believe this by coincidence. The mind is always searching. And when the eyes are open, it's always seeing what is going on in the outside world, what is happening. So it's paying attention or yielding energy, because wherever attention goes, energy flows. It's yielding energy to the outside world. But when you close your eyes and the outside world is no longer physically visible to the eyes, it is forced to look from within. And when you defeat the enemy within, the enemy without will do you no harm. It's an African proverb. And so for the Is That So show today, we have an exciting guest. He's very interesting. Mr. Ben Winter. He is a team building expert. He is the author of What to Expect When Having Expectations. And so I'm definitely curious about that because, I have a chapter in my course, in my coaching program called Expectations is the greatest source of, prison is filled with unmet expectations. And that goes off of my principle that expectations is the greatest source of frustration. So I'm interested to see what Mr. Winter's opinion is on that. We did not talk about what we're going to talk about beforehand because I like to keep it authentic and keep it spontaneous. And also, if you go to his website, which I'll let him announce, but if you go to his website, you can also download How to Stop Being Upset. And he has a nice little chart. I see it's You're Upset. Did you know you had an expectation? A little chart like this, if y'all are looking at the video. But anyway, it's a nice little chart to explore. So I have a few questions, and I'm going to bring my guest up. But I just want to say, take some time for yourself to celebrate yourself. You are important. Appreciate yourself. Go outside and just express gratitude. Gratitude is the highest state of receivership. Gratitude will put you in a position mentally and spiritually to where you are ready to receive what it is that you desire instead of looking at what it is that scares you out of your authentic self. And so gratitude, my message today is, or concept that I want y'all to think about today is gratitude. How to develop a gratitude practice, how to introduce more gratitude in your life. I'm telling you, when you introduce more gratitude in your life, it opens up the bridge to receive more love. You see, oftentimes a lot of us don't feel love, not because that love is not being sent to us, but yet we've not allowed ourselves to open up that energetic door that allows us to receive love because we've fallen victim to what is a pseudo love, which is a love with conditions. Understand that all true love is unconditional, meaning love does not come with conditions. Love loves you when you are well. Love loves you when you are sick. Love loves you when you are rich. Love still loves you when you are poor. Love is love. And the only thing that love will ever accept is love itself. And there's no force on this planet that can equate to the energy, the universal connective tissue that is love. And as we continue to discover these deeper truths of who we are, we continue to move back to that place of oneness. We return to love, as Marianne Williamson had so eloquently stated in her poem. And as we are liberated from our fears, false evidence appearing real, as we are liberated from our fears, our very presence give others the courage to do the exact same thing. So anyway, without further ado, I'm going to bring Mr. Winters on, and I just want to say about this team to this team building expert about expectations. I got a big "Is that so" for him. I got a few "Is that so" for him. So we're gonna see what he has to say, y'all. All right, Mr. Ben Winters, come on in, bro.
All right, thanks for having me.
Yep. The crowd on this show is quite lively, quite lively.
Very
So you got to
enthusiastic,
watch
for
out.
sure.
Yeah, they are. So they just they begin clapping for no damn reason. Oh my goodness! See, they trying to show off. Now y'all cut it out. Y'all cut it out. All right.
I think my biggest message is that a lot of people have expectations backwards, or they have a misconception of them. And a lot of times in the world that we live in today, nobody wants anybody to be upset about anything. They all want everybody to chill out and be calm and relax. And I think being upset is okay as long as you don't stay there and you use it for what it is, which is a point in time where you have a choice to make a different choice to hopefully better your life. So
Is that so? I told you I
yeah.
was gonna hit you with some "Is that so's" today, sir. So you said being angry is okay?
It Being upset is absolutely okay. The problem that I think we have in society today is that too many people stay there. They stay upset. They continue on for days, weeks, months, years, being upset about something, and they don't choose to look at it from a different perspective or take a step back and attempt to understand what the expectation they had that went unmet. And that's what caused them to be upset. Because if we can take that step back from being upset and say, what expectation did I have? You held up the flow chart. First question is, did you even know you had this expectation? And most of the time, we don't even know we had the expectation until it's going unmet, and we have that point in time of being upset. And so that's where I say there's a great opportunity for growth if you take that moment and say, "Hey, I'm upset. Maybe I can take a step back and explore this expectation I didn't even know I had," and go from there. So
Hmm.
so that's kind of why I say it's okay to be upset as long as you use it for what it is, and rather than fall victim to it, stay there.
Indeed, sir. Indeed, good sir. So where I mean, is it wrong to have expectations?
It's not wrong, and it's impossible not to have expectations. Um, the My perspective on expectations is that expectations aren't good or bad, positive or negative. They're simply a thing. And most of the time, when an expectation is being met, we don't think about it as an expectation. We don't give it a second thought in general. So the only time we really recognize an expectation for what it is when it's a negative experience or we're upset by it not being met. For an example, if you wake up in the morning, you expect the electricity to be working. You expect the
Indeed.
refrigerator to be cold.
Mm-hmm.
You expect the water to be running.
Better be.
Yeah. We don't think about these as expectations. We don't even think about them because we're on autopilot and we just assume that they're going to be working. But if you wake up in the morning because your alarm clock didn't go off because the electricity was out, now you're kind of starting to notice, like, hey, I expected the electricity to be on. Now I'm a little upset because I missed my alarm. I missed my meeting. I missed this. I missed that, whatever it is. Now all the food's ruined in the refrigerator and I've got to go buy more food. And all these reasons that we're getting upset from things that we expected to be working without a second thought. Because of that,
Mm-hmm.
expectations, when you say the word, has a negative connotation because that's when they're recognized, is during those negative times. But it's impossible not to have expectations. And people that say, just choose not to have expectations, or I choose not to have expectations so I don't get disappointed, that is an expectation. So now when an expectation goes unmet, you're upset for two reasons. One, the expectation was unmet, and the expectation about not having expectations went unmet. So now you're upset twice.
Mhm.
So rather than just saying, I choose not to have expectations, get rid of that one so you'll never be upset by it. And just understand you have expectations. Some of them you just don't even know about.
Touche, touche, touche. So let me give you a little pushback. Not really pushback, but I agree with what you said. But I do believe there's a balance here. If you develop the skill of awareness, where you can surrender expectation because you know that expectation is present, but you acknowledge that when an expectation arises, when your awareness, when it becomes into your perception that this expectation is here, usually through pain, then you realize that you've made a skill of not having expectation, which then frees you from said expectation. And then you can have peace and understand that you must adapt to change because change is the constant.
Yeah, and I think the key there is what you said at the beginning, which is to develop awareness.
Mm-hmm.
And all personal growth work, whether you read it from a book, whether you attend a class, whether you're getting professional therapy, whatever it is, that's personal growth and that's awareness training. So
Mm-hmm.
until you become more aware, and even this flowchart that we're talking about, the book that I wrote, the book that I have written, it's all about awareness training. Because if you become aware that you have this process when you get upset and that you had an expectation, the faster you are at recognizing the expectation before it goes unmet. And then you're now on the opposite side of catching yourself before you get upset in the first place. But back to your point, that's awareness training. And so many
Mm-hmm.
people aren't willing to go through the process and practice of awareness training to reach that point of stopping things before they start. And
Everything we do is a
that's a trick.
practice, and yeah, everything we do is a practice, and whatever we practice, we become.
Exactly. And people want they want to read a book and be magically like transformed into something
Transformed.
powerful. Whether you take a class, whether you read a book, whatever's content is given to you, you now have a responsibility to practice it on a regular basis until you've mastered it. And even then, you're going to find other things to practice along the way. And we as
Mm.
humans will never be done. We'll never be finished growing unless you choose not to grow anymore. And again, at that point, you'll be aware that you're choosing not to grow. So,
And so, yeah, awareness is key. Ignorance and freedom cannot coexist. Do you agree?
I do. Absolutely.
Yes, we can say the same thing using different words. I discovered that nothing exists without its opposite, and when I realized that so many arguments occur because people are using English words, because I speak English, I'm speaking English to someone else, but we've read from two different dictionaries. That misunderstanding of symbols called words, in how fluid they are and how they can change depending on the person, leads to a lot of the conflict. So I said the reverse must be true in this place of business where everything is and nothing is not, because nothing exists without its opposite in this space. And so when I look at the opposite, I realize that those who are on the same path as me, we say it in different ways, but we're saying the exact same thing.
Yeah. And
And,
I always say that with whenever I'm talking to somebody is that I'm not saying anything different than Tony Robbins, than Napoleon Hill, than all the greats that you can think of when it comes to personal growth. I'm simply saying it in a different way.
mhm. And how is
So
your
to
way
your point.
different? Tell me how your way is different.
So my way stems from the world of improv. And when I say
Mm,
improv, I don't mean stand-up comedy, but I mean like a group of people up on stage creating a scene from nothing. Like the show Whose Line Is It Anyway, where they're up on stage, they get suggestions from the audience, and then they just go. And what's happening there is they're following a simple set of rules. And those simple set of rules create this stage of freedom for the actors. And as long as they're following it, there's really nothing they can do wrong.
mm,
And what do we do every moment of every day of our lives? We improvise. So if we can understand the same rules of improv that apply to stage improv and how they also apply to life and put in that context, I'm saying it differently because it's through the lens of improv, but it's the exact same stuff that you'll hear from, Eckhart Tolle's Power of Now. It's the same thing as focus on the present, which is an improv rule. You know,
Mhm.
being here and present and now, you and I are having a conversation. We're able to communicate and discuss topics. But if I was thinking about after this interview, I've got to do laundry, I got to take the dog for a walk, and I'm thinking about everything else. You're going to ask a question, and I'm going to be like, I don't know what he just said, so I'm going to make up something that may or may not fit here, right?
Mhm.
But by
Mhm.
focusing on the present,
With the thing that I said, with the things that I said, and I said, please don't make me an idol. And the reason why I said that is because I know that there is no difference between you and I. And so all idols in our lives or things that we put above ourselves, they must fall. You know, it's incongruent with my own personal opinion of being present in this present moment. You see, you're not stuck in the trance of unworthiness when you're in the present moment. And it's only in that trance of unworthiness that we need these idols, these symbols of said perfection. So because we are so repulsed by our own imperfection, you know, and so leaning into that discomfort, you know, sensei or a teacher, they can do they can do it right 1,001 times, but if they mess up on that 1,002, the world will come for their ass. And the reason being, because we idolize perfection. And so then it's a you don't practice what you preach and so on and so forth. Then it's a stone throwing. So we got to get out of this addiction to perfection in order to be in the present moment. But what do you think about the current, you know, usage of the phrase toxic people?
most phrases that are shared on the internet, whether it's toxic people, Karens, cancel culture, whatever term is out there, it's not a complete picture of what's happening. When it comes to people that would be considered toxic, if we come from a place of compassion, we're going to understand that there's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes that they are scared and frightened and in pain with. And that's where compassion comes in. We have to understand they're lashing out because they don't know how else to deal with it. Should they be toxic to other people? In my opinion, absolutely not. I feel like they have a choice and that they can go and learn what's happening for them, change and grow. It is always a choice to change and grow.
So
Um,
so let me ask you, how can you be compassionate to them and at the same time call them toxic? Because that's not a if somebody if somebody say I want to be compassionate to you, you're a toxic person, I'm not gonna feel too good about that. Like that doesn't sound too compassionate to me. I gotta,
well,
you know,
and I'm not saying that you would call them toxic either. I'm saying you can be compassionate and choose not to be around them because of the choices that they're making. If they're not aware that they have an issue, they're never going to do anything about it.
mm,
Addicts won't do anything about addiction unless they admit that they have a problem.
mm,
Because if they're
come
an
on.
addict and they don't think they have a problem, guess what? There's nothing you can say to prove that they are. Because that goes to another point of nobody wants to be wrong.
For me, that is the power of the now. For me, that is remaining present because we can serve the mind and its wishes, which desires for us to look at everything that we're afraid of and comes up with this narrative of us being unworthy, or we can choose to move in our truth or live in our truth, you know? And then we serve ourselves by doing that because as we fill ourselves up with fulfillment and love and these higher emotions, that no doubt has no choice but to be projected outward onto the other, therefore improving the compassion and the love out there in the world. And so for me, a toxic person does not exist. It's it's the reason why it's a fad is because it satiates the parts of us that seeks vengeance and seeks to otherize and stone the other. To me, this fad is actually a very cruel one. And yeah, I understand. I'm not trying to step on anybody's toes, and I understand that there's a lot of big wigs who use the phrase toxic. There's a whole lot of books out there. There's thousands of articles now. I got called a toxic person just for saying I don't believe in toxic people. So it's out there, you know, like seriously, like everybody toxic, you know. Um, but again, you can't fool all the people all of the time. But if you fool the right ones, then the rest will fall behind. Dead Prez said that, you know. And
Yeah.
so I believe that this fad, it does not serve, it's not healthy. You know, I believe that it's really a sign of the illness that's present in society. And the fact that so many within my own profession would fall victim to that. unfortunately isn't surprising.
Yeah. So I mean, you kind of bring up an interesting, like the being the present and people aren't toxic, and something that came to mind to kind of prove your point is if you go to a church, the reverend's at the front, and they might come down and they might talk to somebody after services are out, and that person that they're talking to, they might be considered a toxic person, quote unquote. But that reverend is going to spend time, the love, the care to communicate and be with that person. At the same time, they're not going to take that person home with them to their family and whatever negativity they might have had at the time, they're not going to take that home with them and their family. And I think that's kind of
Hmm.
what I was saying is in the present moment, as you were saying, they can be with this person who's not toxic. They're simply going through stuff, and they can
They
be there
can
and they can be compassionate for them, and yet remove themselves as they move into a new present moment, which is them with their family at home.
precisely. And that toxic person, or said toxic person, for me, merely represents a person that is fully engulfed in their own flames and their own personal hell. And so, if I stand too close to a person on fire, of course I'm going to get burned. But for me, if I just got burned from someone engulfed in flames, I'm not going to pick up a stone and throw it at their head.
No.
I'm going to have compassion because even though I've just gotten burned from standing too close, this person is fully engulfed in flames. That's compassion, and we know that those who are the most difficult to love are the ones who need it the most. I cannot call you toxic and welcome you in. All right, we can move on. I just want to get your opinion on that, Ben. I just want to get your
Yeah,
opinion. How you
I
feel?
think we're in complete agreement, even if we're saying it differently. I like what you're saying, and I completely agree.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. I just wanted to broach the topic, and I do believe we're in alignment with this. So, teach us about expectations. You said your book is about expectations. So, what don't we know about expectations that we need to know, other than the fact that we are not aware of the fact that we always have expectations present?
So I think I've touched on a lot of it, and going back to the flow chart, if we if we start with the understanding that most of the time we didn't even know we had the expectation, we can use that as personal growth and learn and grow from it. Another piece is that we have to recognize when we choose not to share an expectation with somebody else. And why
Okay.
would we not share an expectation with somebody else? And a lot of the times the answer is fear.
Hmm.
We maybe think, if I share this expectation with somebody else, they're going to think I'm crazy and they're going to leave. Or they're not going to agree with it and they're going to think I'm silly or whatever. Rejection is the word. There's a fear of rejection in some form or fashion.
Hmm.
Um, the other piece is, and this goes to entitlement, is if I share my expectation with somebody else, I now feel that they have to follow through on it. But that's not the case. Just because you share it doesn't mean the other person's going to agree 100% with it because they have their own expectations as well. And so, what needs to happen once both people have shared their expectations is to do this. It's a lost art. People don't do it anymore, but it's called communicate. You got to come together and talk and listen and communicate with one another. Because if you can communicate with one another, that creates that compassion we were talking about, that creates understanding, and you're able to come to a common ground, to a negotiation. And maybe both expectations can fully be realized without
Mr.
conflicting
Ben,
with one another.
beautifully said, and I agree. So that presents another question in my mind. How can one communicate with the other when one chooses not to communicate with oneself?
Well, and it does start with communicating with yourself. I do believe though, if you start to recognize, hey, I'm upset, and you go through this process, that's the start of you communicating with yourself because you're taking that responsibility in hand and no longer falling victim to being upset. And the more you do that, the more you're in communication with yourself, and the less you're going to be upset, the faster you're going to move through this process. And then when you're actually approaching somebody else with your expectations and sharing them, you're coming at it from a place of responsibility as opposed to, I need you to do this because if you don't, you're a horrible person, which
Is
is
that
not
so?
which is not the way to do it. You say, I have needs and wants. if you're not able to provide them, please let me know, and I will let you know what that means for me. Another great
Ooh,
word for this is boundaries.
well, that is another great word, and we're gonna bring that up in a second.
Okay.
But let me ask you this: a person can, in a moment, though, expect to be able to fulfill said expectation, but then people change their mind like they change their drawers, man. So people are fickle. We're fickle creatures, and so when one changes their mind or realizes that they cannot meet said expectation, the other person still feels, you know,
Absolutely.
left out.
Let's go back to what we talked about before. It's a practice. Nobody's going to be perfect at this. So there's got to be some level of grace in there to say, I
Mhm.
know I shared my expectation. I know you agreed to it. You failed to meet that expectation. Are you aware of said fact? Oh,
Mhm.
yeah, my bad. I'm so used to doing it this way that I forgot you wanted it a different way. I'm going to keep practicing to do it the way that I said I would.
Mm.
It's like telling somebody in a relationship to change, or you want them to change. First of all, okay, you can always ask somebody to change. Whether they will or not is up to the other person. But if they agree to the change, you have to give them the leeway to practice, because as an adult, and we'll just say the age of 30, you jump into a relationship at the age of 30 with somebody else, and now they expect something from you that you've never done in 30 years of life. It's not going to change in a 3 minute, 5 minute, 30-minute conversation. It might
Mhm.
take months or years before
Mhm.
they fully change that program,
Mhm.
because they've been doing it a certain way for 30 years. So now give them the grace to practice that change so that it becomes the new habit.
And so patience.
Patience and grace, absolutely.
Ben, can you define, because many of us say, yeah, I just need patience, but can you define what patience is for the people?
It's such a fun one because that's my life lesson that I get to keep
Mhm.
practicing. It The way that I see patience is, it really depends on the situation, but it really means taking a step back and not forcing an action to occur.
Mhm.
Um, the best way that I can describe it is, if I send a text message to somebody and I expect them to respond quickly because they usually do, my next lesson is patience in waiting for them to respond, because I've made up so many times in my life why they don't respond. And never once in my entire life of texting, which is over 20 years, I've never been right about why they didn't text back when they, within a minute or an hour or whatever. Like, days
Mhm.
could pass and I could be so wrong as to why they didn't respond every single
Mhm.
time. So I get to practice patience because the alternative is worry and doubt and fear. And I also get to remind myself, because of the awareness training I've done, never once has that worry, doubt, and fear ever come true.
So it sounds so. It's a skill, that I've been developing, and so over time I've been, assuming that I do not know, because that's what made Socrates the wisest person, right? He knew that he did not know, and so even for words that I know, I still assume that I do not know. And so with patience, the interesting thing I found is that it says, if I recall correctly, the capacity to hold pain for an extended period of time without becoming disheartened, to the capacity to hold pain for an extended period of time without becoming disheartened. And one can define pain as discomfort. I mean, pain can be, a bullet shot, or it could be a mosquito bite. Pain can be a breakup, or it could be somebody taking your parking spot knowing you're about to park there. But when I think about that, now that gives me an arrow to shoot for as far as developing the skill of patience, because it's definitely a skill. And we know we're going to practice it poorly when we're being deliberate at first, but anything worth doing is worth doing poorly. Ben, you look like you wanted to say something.
Well, it's funny because that definition is very, very much the. So I wrote another book. It's kind of a first draft right now, but it's called Procrastinations.
Mm-hmm.
And I put this together because the definition that you just shared of patience really didn't fit for what I'm attempting to practice in my world and my life. Because I have the Oxford language definition of the capacity to accept or tolerate delay, trouble, or suffering without getting angry or upset.
Mm-hmm.
That's just the capacity. And then I took the word procrastinate, which is to delay or postpone action or put off doing something. And I was like, well, that's not what I'm doing either because you know, it was kind of a hybrid of the two. And so I came up with procrastinations as a word, which is postponing action without suffering or being angry until something else occurs in which action makes sense. And so for me, as we're talking, that really feeds into patience being living in the present.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're living in the present, you're not thinking about what's going to happen soon. You're not thinking about the worry, fear, and doubt that may come with whatever is in the future. You're simply in the present. So I
Mm-hmm.
kind of feel to some extent as we're talking that patience may be living in the present.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It most certainly is part of that process, brethren. But all of these, like you were saying about the process of helping a person to transition. So in my field, again, not giving you therapeutic advice, but in my field, I believe the most concise conceptions that I can come up with right now are mental rigidity versus cognitive flexibility. Mental rigidity versus cognitive flexibility, and we've discovered, if I recall correctly, that mental rigidity is present in pretty much all of the disorders that we treat. All of the things that cause people to dysfunction, the cognitive distortions that we treat in our field. And so, what we're teaching, especially in the acceptance and commitment therapy realm, where we're teaching people to be is cognitively flexible, able to adjust to the environment. And if you can adjust or release the anchor of expectation that you had, then you can be present. And so, I believe Charles Darwin, you said it. We say it in different ways, but we're saying the same thing. Charles Darwin said, "Survival of the fittest." It's not about who's the tallest, who can run the fastest, or who the strongest. It's about what species can adapt. And so it's about the ability to change. Whoever can change, whoever can develop the skill of adapting to change the best, that's the fittest always. And so everything that we're doing is teaching people how to be pliable, how to release the attachments that the mind has and remain present, right? Remain in this present moment. Expectations. Sometimes I hear people say, you know, I never expected them to die. And for me, expectations are glue that then binds you to a thing. And so expectations is an addiction to outcome. And so since I never expected them to leave, every morning I wake up because that binds me. That expectation is super glue that binds me to the past. And so every day I wake up and relive my morning because I never expected, and I'm still in that space of never expected, never expectedness. And when we can worry about, or when we choose to worry about the future, we are worrying about something that does not presently exist. And we have an expectation up there in the future, which then binds us to an outcome that does not exist. And until that outcome is present, we anxiously wait. We put ourselves in emotional purgatory until that outcome is present. And that's if that outcome ever becomes present, which then leaves many of us in a chronic state of depression and anxiety. What else do we need to know about expectations?
Here's the part that really sucks for most people and in hearing and understanding it. I talked about programs, the things that we grew up with. We learn how to walk, we learn how to speak English, we learn how to use a fork, a knife, and spoon. We learn how life works by watching our parents, by seeing our friends, by watching TV, by going to school, all those things. So as we grow up, we have an expectation of how the world works. Now, this is not a conscious expectation. This is our subconscious saying, this is how the world works. So that if you come across anything that contradicts your subconscious, there is now an internal fight within your brain that says, this isn't okay. Something's wrong. And this is where a lot of our unknown expectations come from is, wait a second, you grow up in a household where you're very polite and you hold the door for people. you hold the door for somebody and they get upset with you for holding the door, or you expect them to say thank you, but you don't realize you're expecting them to say thank you because you grew up your entire life opening the door for people or learning that that's what you do and having people be polite about it and saying thank you. So here you are opening the door for somebody and they say, I didn't want that. Now you're kind of thrown off because your subconscious says, well, but you're supposed to be okay with this. And your conscious mind is saying it's okay that they're not. And now you have this internal conflict happening.
Mm.
And this something I said earlier was that nobody wants to be wrong. Your subconscious has no bearing on right, wrong, good, or bad. Your subconscious is this is what is, and this is what I will fight for tooth and nail forever. If you grow up in a household of hate, then your programming says hate is the right answer. And to prove yourself wrong takes a lot of conscious effort. And
Mm.
it's frustrating because you start seeing this out in the world where people are operating on autopilot from their expectations of how they grew up. They're operating as a 7-year-old or a 10-year-old in an adult body because they haven't taken the time to have this awareness training and to practice something else. Their subconscious is simply running this program saying, it is what it is, and I will fight tooth and nail to make sure this is right. And when you challenge that, I'm going to fight back. I mean, just turn on the news. We got people like saying, you're wrong. No, you're wrong. No, you're wrong. No, you're wrong. And nobody's getting anywhere. So if you want to really play with it, this is what your mind is doing on a day-to-day basis is your past and your programming is constantly coming up against what is now in the present.
Ergo, we don't see things as they are; we see them as we are. Again,
Exactly.
Freud, he called it a projected hypothesis, and the mind makes a projected hypothesis based off of experiences it's had in the past. And if all it's pulling from is information from the past and projecting it into the future, then it becomes a pretty much a permanent feedback loop. And so if you're programmed on the negative, then that's all you're spotting. Sort of kind of like you purchase your car and you love your car, and all of a sudden you see everybody else driving. And it's not that more people are now driving your vehicle, it's that now you've told your mind to pay attention to this because this is important to you, this particular vehicle. And now you spot it everywhere. It's about awareness. Where are you paying your attention? Wherever attention goes, energy flows. And so what you're giving energy to will continue to show up in your life, and so that whatever you put out there, that's what you pull back in, that's what you attract. You feel what I'm saying, brother Ben?
Yeah, again, here we are saying the exact same thing. What's interesting about all the things that you're saying is that a lot of that is a subconscious action we don't even realize is playing out. And that's the frustrating part when people hear it. It's like what energy you put out is what you get back, except they're like, well, I'm just putting out good, happy vibes and I'm getting anger back. But you grew up in a house of anger and hate and frustration. And so your
Mm.
subconscious wants to find that because it doesn't want to be wrong. But here you are wanting something different. Now, here's the beauty of this situation is that the conscious mind is really, really strong. But you have to practice it until you create that new program that's bigger, stronger, louder than the old one. And that's why it
Er-
takes practice. That's why you can't do it in a day. You have to create a new habit with a new voice to silence the other one.
Ergo, moving from the mentally rigid to the cognitively pliable or flexible.
Absolutely.
And so becoming more aware and able to adjust to change and understand, and letting your mind know that there's more than one ways to have peace. There's more than one path to peace. There's more than one path to happiness. There's more than one path to love. And that just because one path has closed off does not mean that you don't have a path that is equal in value, if not greater to you. You just have to allow yourself to begin to search again. That's it. You didn't have it. It's not about having what it is that we want, but choosing an experience. And then when we have an experience, then stepping back and deciding based off of our values what to choose again. Again, we close our eyes. When we close our eyes, we go inside, we return to beingness. And it's from beingness that we didn't get guidance on what to do, which is why many people will go down. Many spiritual people will pray first before operating in any space. What you think about that, Ben?
I love how eloquent you are, sir.
Eloquent.
Absolutely.
And for me, religion is an established religion. There's established religion, and then there's religion. For me, the definition for me for religion is every thought, word, and deed. I believe all of us have our own personal religion. You know that we, if all you do is do music, then you wake up, you think about music, you do music, you go to sleep thinking about music. Then your religion is music. And so for me, that's what religion is. And I think we've got to get back down to that pure understanding of what religion is, so we can have like a decent conversation about like beliefs, because ultimately it's about people's belief system. When you talk about right and wrong, you're talking about subjective concepts. And that's why in my practice, I tell people, look, we're going to remove right and wrong from your vocabulary. We're going to start saying healthy versus unhealthy. Because in the state of Louisiana, which is where I'm from, we could drink here. We some drinkers. We didn't put our college, and I'm not bragging on this, but we've traveled to other cities and we put them out of liquor. Like they're like, send the back up, call the next county. These tigers are crazy. But yeah, man, like seriously, drinking is a part of the culture, right? So if I ask someone here, is it wrong to drink? Say no, I'm of legal age, drink in moderation. Then I ask them, okay, is it unhealthy to drink? You see, when I add in that word, that forces in some objectivity.
Mm-hmm.
Depending on what you're drinking, depending on who you are, depending on your current health status, physical health status, the current on your mental status. For me, liquor brings down my frequency. No matter what my physical body, what state my physical body is in, liquor brings it down. And also, I know that alcohol is a depressant. So all of these things have to be taken into consideration when you make it more objective. I think that we have to begin to speak or understand what we're saying to each other first in order to have a true dialogue. Otherwise, all we're doing is just tossing out symbols, making sounds with our mouths. Pretty much that's it.
Yeah, I've actually been working on another book around perspective and the fights that occur in today's society about what's right and what's wrong. Most of the time, they're about subjective issues. And to your point, there is no right and wrong. It's like asking what's the best pizza topping. Depends on who you are. I mean, I don't care what you put on your pizza. If it's your favorite thing and you think it's the best, then it is for you. I think it's something else.
And that's what expanded awareness is.
Yeah.
When you begin to move, I'm sorry, but let me say this real quick because you got me excited for a second. When you begin to move to the space of understanding that multiple truths can exist and you don't have to eradicate any truth that isn't your own, now we can move into having an actual dialogue, because what's right for me may not be right for Ben or right for anybody else. It's probably just right for me. So who am I to put what's right for me on Ben or anybody else? Yeah. I got to respect. That's why I say when you operate from the pure definition of religion and then you operate from the space of respecting religion, that takes on a whole nother dynamic.
Absolutely. And I think the key there is the difference between subjective and objective truths. And there's no right or wrong when it comes to subjective truths. And unfortunately, when you really dive into this subject, it can get painful because you start to see what people think and feel and their beliefs that may or may not be, well, I'm going to say for me aren't right for me. And I think they're absolutely horrible, but for them, it's what they believe. And it's subjective in nature because I've looked every way possible to find an objective view from it, and it's not there. And it's painful to think that their thoughts and beliefs about certain things, I'm just like, it's painful to say that their truth is a truth. It's not my truth, it's their truth. It is what it is. But when we start getting to objective truths, and that's what I think needs to be focused on when it comes to, we'll just say, government. If it's an objective truth, they can govern on it. If it's subjective, we've already lost if they're fighting over it. And that is, I think, one of our biggest issues with the society today is let's stop fighting about subjective truths. Let's start focusing on objective truths. Get on the same field, figure out the same goal, and then decide if it's true or not.
We fight because we're watching or seeing something that scares us. We will always fight over subjective truths as long as our reflection in the mirror scares us. Period. I mean, that's my take on it. You know, that's my hypothesis. And I don't mean that in a dire. I'm trying to be realistic here because this is why I push my mission statement to assist others in developing the audacity to live unapologetically authentic, because it's in that space of authenticity that we're choosing love over fear. And in that space of choosing love, or what's in operating from a values-based place, and choosing to do what's most important to us, we begin to see how interconnected all of us are. And then your good becomes my good, you know, as opposed to I need to protect myself from you, you know. All of, you know, for the bulk of mental health, for the most part, our goal is to assist people in feeling safe again. Because if you feel safe, then by default, you will be your authentic self. But people don't feel safe, even though we are the safest we've ever been, at least in the States, the safest we've ever been in humanity, I believe, as far as the technological advances and whatnot. It appears that we're the most anxious that we've ever been in human existence. And anxiety is the bodily experience of fear. Where did all this fear come from? Perspectives. Perspectives. Can't fool all of the people all of the time, but you fool the right ones and the rest will fall behind. Yeah. Ben, look, go ahead. I'm sorry.
One last piece of that. So going back to not wanting to be wrong and the subjective truths we'll fight for, I truly believe that goes back to when we were all living in small, tiny villages around the planet, where it was days or weeks or months to get to the next village. If you didn't believe what everybody else in that village believed, you were outcast. You were sent away, which likely meant your death. So for thousands and thousands and thousands of years, that's how humans lived. It became so ingrained in us and our physiological nature to survive, we can't be wrong. And now we're in a world today where you can cross the street and find somebody who agrees with you, even if the person right next to you does not. It's no longer a bad thing to change your mind and decide for yourself that you were wrong about something. You'll find other people that will agree with you. And yeah, the things that we'll fight about don't make sense anymore because it's not a life or death situation anymore. So,
and brother, that's why I say risk it all on you. You know, I shoot for the stars, and if I miss, pray that I land on a cloud.
Sure. So I like to leave people with something very simple, which is it's okay to be upset. Just remember that. And also remember that just because you're upset, it doesn't mean you get to stay there. If you want something different in your life, choose differently at that moment. It's a great point in time for personal growth if you recognize it for what it is. And to find out more, you can go to my website, havingexpectations.com. You can get the flowchart we've been talking about. You can download it for free, print it out, put it on your fridge, put it at work. All the places that you typically find yourself getting upset as a nice reminder of how to move through that.
For being on this show, man. Did you have a good time?
I had an excellent time, and you are very eloquent. I hope you recognize that. And
I don't.
Your audience, well, your audience is lucky to have your eloquence.
So you can purchase a lot of information out there in the self-help and self-development industry, but it's not this information. The knowing is not enough. You know, we must do. To be willing is not enough. We must apply. That's Bruce Lee. And so the understanding must convert into understanding. What you know up here in your mind must be able to travel down and move into your heart, and then you must practice that, because knowledge in motion is wisdom. And until you convert that knowledge or that information that you have into wisdom, you don't gain the benefit. It's just information that you have. It's like having a fork but never picking it up to use it, you know? And so take whatever information and get his book. But when you read whoever books, my sister just came out with a new book on being a bonus parent, you know, and how to navigate those challenges, birth from the heart. But no matter what mode you choose, make sure that you go deeper in your understanding of that, because no matter where you stand at on the planet, if all of us were to continuously dig, like I've said so many times before, without ending, we all reach the same core. It's not about what to know. It's about knowing enough of what it is that you think that you know, because you don't know enough of that. You got to go deeper. That's why Ben did a great job of prompting that for me, because it brought me right back. We got to go deeper in our understanding to the point that we get understanding. All of us stand under certain laws and truths. How many of us are operating in and standing on these truths, though? That's the key. That requires your understanding to convert to the knowing and the doing, application, and continuing to do that. Even when you mess up, knowing that even when you stumble, you still stumble forward. Look, that's all I got to say. Agape people, thank y'all for listening to me. Listen to my guests. This has been a great show, and stay lit. Stay LIT, living in truth, y'all. I'm out.